Hey everyone, this is lecture 1.2, some basic sociological theory. In this lecture, we're going to talk about basic sociological theory. In terms of content warnings, we're going to talk about murder as a crime, we're going to talk about ethnocentrism, and we're going to talk some about drugs. So, just like the previous lecture was about getting everyone on the same page with science, this one is to get everyone on the same page in terms of very basic sociological theory. This is a sociology course with a focus on the sociological subdiscipline of deviance and criminology. In a lot of places now, and this is pretty cool, criminology is its own major, but it did start off as a subdiscipline of sociology itself. Let's define each of these things though. Sociology is the study of human behavior, particularly how humans interact with each other and larger social structures. Deviance, then, is the study of human behavior that is considered to be abnormal by members of society. And what exactly is that abnormal? We'll talk about that in a few slides. And then criminology is the study of why people commit crime, as well as how society labels people who are, quote unquote, criminal. Who is that? What does that mean? How does one person who steals something be called criminal, while another person who steals something could be said to be making an honest mistake? What's that dynamic look like? That's what criminologists look at. Cultural criminology, then, is a subdiscipline within criminology that studies how culture and deviant behavior and criminal behavior interact with each other. I want to point out that criminology is different from the study of criminal justice. Criminal justice is defined as the study of prevention of crime as well as methods of catching and punishing criminals. So a criminal justice, or the discipline of criminal justice, is more along the lines of what police officers use. Criminology is more about understanding why people commit crime. And those people of those two different disciplines can sometimes get in fights with each other because oftentimes they make different basic assumptions about what it means to be a criminal. Social scientific knowledge often contradicts what is called common sense. Common sense are widely held beliefs that people repeat and are often inaccurate, unsupported by scientific research. Misconceptions is a pretty good replacement term for that word common sense. So examples of that could be drug use among blacks and whites. In general, there is a stereotype, there is a misconception, but what some people would say is common sense that black people use drugs more often than white people. The fact of the matter is that when we look at the sociological research, people of all demographics, especially racial demographics, use intoxicating substances at about the same rates. Now, there can be variance on which substances are used, but that is far, far more complex than our example. The causes of homelessness. People often think, well, homeless people are just lazy and just don't want to work. The reality of the matter is many homeless people have jobs, and that's as good as they can do with their jobs. Additionally, many homeless people are mentally ill and are actually incapable of maintaining a dwelling of their own. And some homeless people just that they can't make that happen. They can't get their stuff together. There are so many reasons that homelessness exists in our country. If we're not careful as sociologists or criminologists or even criminal justice people, social scientists run the risk of developing what we call sentimentality. Sentimentality is a disposition on behalf of the researcher to leave certain variables in a research problem unexamined due to personal attitudes. That can be more quickly defined as getting it too personal, right? There are two different types of conventional sentimentality. There's conventional and unconventional. Conventional sentimentality sides with the official world, with the rules, with the law. So we side with police, or we could side with university administrators, or we could side with politically powerful politicians. And then we have unconventional sentimentality, which causes us by reflex to side with the unconventional world. So automatically siding with the little guy, the revolutionaries, the drug addicts. Neither of those is good in terms of science, right? Now, your individual worldview may cause you to side with one as opposed to the other, but the reality of the matter is, as social scientists, we need to do our best to keep from either of those from happening. And it should be noted that given the interests of most social scientists, we do have a distinct tendency toward unconventional sentimentality. There are other barriers, though, to studying our topics in the social world. Ethnocentrism is one of those. This is judging other cultures based on your cultural standards, as opposed to cultural relativity, which is judging other cultures based on the standards of that culture itself. Sometimes cultural relativity is called multiculturalism, and within the social sciences, we want to go toward cultural relativity as opposed to ethnocentrism, because to understand a group of people or to understand a society, you must understand who they are and how they understand the world. Now we're going to go into some basic sociological theory. So, sociological relativity are the judgments and evaluations that determine what of the actions we see are or aren't deviant. So how do we decide what is deviant, what isn't deviant? There are two related phenomena here of defining deviance up or defining deviance down. If we define deviance up, we define it as being more important in our place as opposed to another place. If we define deviance as down, it is less important here than it is there. So these are terms of comparison, right? So for example, adultery in the United States, cheating on one's spouse, is seen as being kind of a violation of the social contract in the United States. But adultery is not illegal in the United States. You can't be put in prison for adultery, but it is defined up in Saudi Arabia because you can be put in prison for adultery in Saudi Arabia, as opposed to defining it down in the United States. Again, we see cheating on your monogamous spouse as being a pretty severe violation of a social contract, but in some place like France, where they have more lax attitudes toward adultery, they are less likely to see that as like a violation of community norms. Thus, between the United States and France, the deviance of adultery is defined down. Deviance is both socially constructive and relative. And just like culture, deviance changes based on both time and place. What is deviant here in the United States is different than what is deviant in Germany. And what is deviant today is different than what was deviant 70 years ago, right? That time and place both have a way of shaping what the rules of society are. To understand what makes something deviant, you have to understand the standards of that society. Society will be defined as the total collective of people living in a given location at a given time. A group, then, is a collection of more than one person, and societies are made up of many, many groups. A culture, then, a total culture, is the total set of customs, understandings, and behaviors within a given society. You can break that up to talk about subcultures, countercultures, and dominant cultures, but this is where we're going to let it sit for right now. Most elements of culture fall into one of the following categories: values, norms, mores, laws, and folkways. And each of these will have its own slide, and each of these builds off the other. So, values are the abstract concepts of righteous and evil, of good and bad in a given society. For example, we value human life, or we value the ability of humans to choose their own life and life chances, right? That is a value that we have. We have that value of human life, and the norm is the rule based on the collective values. So we value human life, thus it is not acceptable to cause physical harm to other people. Value life, norm, don't hurt people. A more then is a strong norm. And that's said more, not more. It's a French term, basically. There should be a little accent mark above the E if I was being super accurate. So we don't murder people. That is a stronger norm than just don't hurt people. Thus, it is a more. A law, then, is a norm that has been codified. It's been written down. It's on the books. It's the official rule, right? Often, mores are laws. They aren't always laws. There are some laws that do not pertain to very, very strong values, and there are some laws that don't apply to our values at all. Often, a common example is jaywalking. It is illegal to jaywalk, to cross at the wrong point on the street. However, people just don't care that they don't think you've done a very bad thing if you do that. Now, a point of contention, a point of conflict in society can occur when there are too many laws that don't match up with norms in a given society, and when that occurs, it can have the broader implications of destabilizing that society. That is often a moment that's tough to live through. As I just said, it's against the law to jaywalk, but people don't really feel bad about it. Attitudes about cannabis, about marijuana, are changing today in our society very, very rapidly. There are even now people talking about using other hallucinogenics as potential pharmaceuticals. All of those ideas would have been seen as utterly insane in the 1980s, for example. A folkway, then, is a casual, informal norm. So typically, a folkway is a matter of politeness or a matter of manners, or just that's how we do it around here. But if you violate a folkway, you may be seen as being rude, or you may be seen as not fitting in, but nothing horrible will happen to you. With that said, following folkways is much harder to do because there aren't those strong repercussions. So if you do a pretty common thing as opposed to how everyone else is doing it, then it can say, oh, I see that guy, he's an outsider. Here's an example from the movie Inglourious Basterds. So the man you're seeing in the picture is a English spy who's pretending to be German. In this scene, he gives away his identity as being an English spy by holding up his 3 middle fingers to order 3 drinks. And this is pointed out in the movie too. Germans during that era, and to the best of my knowledge today, they hold out their thumb, their index finger, and their middle finger like in a different way than we do in the United States to indicate 3. That's the German way of doing it. Well, that indicated to the other spies that were in that pub, hey, this guy's different from us. And that takes an intense amount of knowledge to fit in that way. Norms, including folkways, mores, and laws, are enforced by sanctions. Sanctions are defined as what we do to members of society who violate norms. Most typically, when we think about norms, they are negative sanctions, which are the ways we punish people when they do bad things. So negative sanctions are more commonly thought of than positive sanctions, for example. I just said that. Positive sanctions, though, are the ways we reward people when they do something exceptionally good. So if you kill somebody, we impose the negative sanction of prison or maybe even the death penalty on you. That's a negative sanction. If you save someone's life, we may give you a medal or celebrate you or say, isn't he the greatest guy ever, right? That's a positive sanction. Okay, that is the end of this lecture. And as always, if you have questions, please let me know.